I really hope that you will not get asleep, because the intention of this session is really to energize you, to keep you alive, okay? And please be active with questions. Put questions on Slido. We ask for your questions. And I will do a very brief, just putting things in perspective in English language. Then I will soon shut up and we will continue in Latvian language our panel discussion. I am Māris Vanovskis. I am the head of FICIL Investment Security and Protection Working Group. But that is only part of the reason I am here today chairing this discussion. The most honorable reason sits right there, Ilse Znotiņa. Ilse has done really the job, right? Yeah, well, Ilse is the person who has led FICIL's Economic Crime Prevention Working Group for over 2 years. And, you know, a number of initiatives, a number of proposals, a number of very good ideas are already in the pipeline and in the implementation. But since Ilse is now sitting together, now in the law enforcement side, I have to take this position today, Ilse. But thank you so much for all your contribution to FICIL. And I also wanted to tell you a little bit, putting things in perspective. What is FICIL? What is FICIL actually doing? Is FICIL only doing this once per year meeting? Yes, we are doing this. But it's a little bit more behind the scenes. You know, with the 7 years I have personally had the experience with FICIL, we have had, it is thousands, really thousands of hours invested by the working groups, by the FICIL membership. It is thousands of pages written on proposals, on papers, on responses, on reactions, on protests, and also a few success story letters as well, right? So it's a massive, massive investment. So, and then there are hundreds of meetings. We're doing meetings, you know, in the working groups, with the policymakers, with the legislator, with to make the agenda through, and that is a major thing. And then there are, of course, you know, tens of discussions and a number of events. But this is really just the tip of the iceberg. The real work is done behind the scenes. And, you know, over many years, there have also been success stories. And I just want to tell a couple of those, because what it matters, you know, this most honorable panel, these people who came through these doors, do they really need introduction? I think no. Their names speak for themselves, their positions speak for themselves, but why are they here? It is because of the cooperation format that FICIL is having. You know, it is basically developing the agenda through the cooperation. That is our concept. And what has been done? For instance, insolvency. In insolvency, more than 200 very particular legislative proposals have been developed over years. A new law has been passed. And whoever says what, this is a major achievement, a major investment. Also, if we talk about financing, if we talk about financing the development of the judiciary, of economic crime, I remember we were sitting also together with the government, with the Minister of Finance, and there is much more allocation of funding to specific units within the law enforcement agencies to deal with economic crime, to deal with these issues, to put task forces together, to put commando teams together. That has been done. Of course, a lot needs to be done, but that is in place. Also, over these years, we have been working on court system development, court system efficiency, and there are a number of positive developments there. For instance, the timelines are shrinking. The timelines are shrinking on reviewing civil matters. These things of illegal takeovers of companies, several years ago, that was a major thing, taking over company illegally, right? And then basically legislation was put in place. Those raiderisms is not on the agenda anymore so much, right? Arbitration courts. Who can tell how many arbitration courts there were in Latvia 4 years ago? Any idea?
200.
Right. For our major country, almost 300 arbitration courts. What do these courts were doing? This was almost like a court for one transaction, right? You set up a transaction, you set up a court which will review this transaction. So things like that. And that, major things also were done by arbitration law reform. Now these courts are much less, and the scandals are much less. And we could go, on, and we have also been talking a lot about basically raising the level of the authority of law enforcement, because that is a major thing. Trust by you investors, by you businesses, is not for granted, yes? Trust needs to be earned, and the ones who apply law need to be trustworthy, and that is the major thing, right? That is the major aim. And, raising this authority of legal enforcement system, of court system, has also been firmly on FICIL's agenda over these number of years. But why have we really gathered here if everything is, just success stories? Unfortunately, not only. Latvia has really come through a major challenges this very year. For instance, there was a month of February, right? A month of February. What happened in February? In February, the Finance Ministry of the United States announced a major decision against one leading Latvian bank. What else happened in February? The key officer, the governor of the Bank of Latvia, basically got arrested, right? And now is facing the corruption charges. We also hear very alarming things. For instance, last week, there was a major tragedy on the streets of Riga. Yes? So things we are actually facing at the moment. Our financial sector is facing a reputational crisis, and that is the reality. And for that reason, the main thing is how our law enforcement, how our agencies, how our society reacts to this. What are we changing? And that is basically, why we have also gathered today here. But that is not only those scandals which I mentioned. There are systemic things behind the events which we can watch on television. And these systemic things we will actually discuss today when speaking to you, foreign investors, but not only foreign investors. You foreign investors, you are the same entrepreneurs in Latvia who are doing business. So in that case, there is no difference between a foreign investor and a local company doing the business here. And when speaking with you, we have identified 4 key areas where there are gaps. And those gaps need to be discussed, those gaps need to be filled, those gaps need to be addressed. And therefore, the core of our today's discussion is about those areas and the gaps. And we will be discussing resources, cooperation, quality, and regulation. And of course, it goes in the circle. So this is This is the challenge for today. We will have an open discussion, and at this point I will switch in Latvian. Okay. Mums būs atklāta.
We will have an open discussion, and I'd really like to see your active engagement and would like to see panelists challenging each other, because there is no better thing than panelists challenging each other and debating with each other. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you a very prominent and reputable panel. So today, among our panelists, we have Dana Rezniece-Ozole, Minister for Finance of the Republic of Latvia. We have Eriks Kalmērs, Prosecutor General of the Republic of Latvia. We also have Jakob Straume, the head of the Anti-Corruption Agency, or Corruption Prevention Combating Bureau, or KNAF short. Ilze Znotiņa, and I will not read out the long title, the head of the FIU, Financial Intelligence Unit. We also have Inna Kuzmina, the head of Regional Investigation Division of the Tax and Customs Police Department of the State Revenue Service. And then we also have Pēteris Baunska, head of the Economic Crimes Unit of the State Police. So, dear panelists, I think we can dive into the discussion, and I will now sit down. Dear panelists, can we kick off the discussion with the following question? I talked about February, I talked about a number of dates, 13th of February, now we're in June, a lot of time has passed, and in Latvia we celebrate Christmas and Midsummer Solstice, and Christmas, Midsummer Solstice. Try to imagine yourself near the Christmas time. And I would like to ask you to answer to the following question. What has changed since February 13 when FICIL announced its functions? What has changed since then? Are we living in a different world, or are we not living in a different world? And since this is Christmas, what are the achievements of your particular authority or your institution, and what have you done to address those challenges? Are we living in a different world? Or are we not living in a different world? And if I may, I'd like to ask Madam Minister for Finance to answer this question first. Well, thank you for inviting me to discuss the important issues of the financial sector, or the integrity of the financial sector, with other prominent representatives of important state institutions. A lot has happened since February. February was basically, or 30th of February, was the date when we realized that we need to approach a SWOT analysis of the financial sector needs to be changed, because our perception of strengths and weaknesses was wrong, because probably some of the weaknesses were our strengths and some of the strengths were weaknesses, but we are still de-risking, and we are still having this war or clash between those who want to wipe out dirty money out of Latvia and those who want to continue servicing, those dirty money flows. And I think that we are basically on a brink of big change, on a verge of big change. We have made our big geopolitical choices, but how those choices are translated into each and every area of the government work still remains to be clarified. And the realization that we got in February was that the system is as strong as its weakest link. We have done a lot to improve the regulatory framework, and that has been appreciated by our partners, whereas the enforcement has probably been lagging behind. That is not something that we can solve overnight, but there are still some months to go until Christmas when we will evaluate what we or assess or look back at what we have done, take a stock of what we have done. And now the weakest link, which is the FIU, is being revitalized, if you will, revitalized under the new management with a new manager who's come with new energy and is ready to make the regulatory controls stronger. Now, let us give the floor to Madam Znotiņa, the face of the FIU. What is your vision, or how do you see the FIU mission, and what are the short-term goals that you would like to attain by Christmas, and are we living in a new world? Well, hello everyone. Maris, I would like to say that we are indeed living in an entirely different world, and if I wouldn't believe that we can achieve that, then I wouldn't be sitting here in my new capacity and would rather be challenging my colleagues who are sitting next to me on behalf of the FICIL. I would like to echo a minister's remarks. What confused us or has made us rethink that the functioning of the system has forced us to aim higher as well, because we don't want to find ourselves in a situation we were on 13th of February, so most probably on Christmas. Mr. Kalmeyevs, Prosecutor General, and I will be parting our ways. We will be separated or taken out of the PGO organizational structure, and I know that he will be happy about that, and we will have a goodbye party or divorce party, if you will, which is going to be a merry occasion indeed. But my objective as the head of the FIU is to improve the efficiency of the FIU and help other law enforcement agencies avoid a situation where we are being controlled by those who have a lot of money, and for us to be able to regain the control of the whole system. And I think that's going to be the biggest gift for me, regaining the control over the process and understanding clearly where we're headed. Another follow-up question. Are you dealing with systemic problems now changing the governance and management of the FIU? Was that a problem or a decision long coming, or is that a fresh idea? Well, I already told you, as an outsider to the FIU, have analyzed a lot its efficiency, and I don't think that the governance, or the regulatory control model was that bad, but I think that FIU needs to work a lot efficiently, and Mr. Kalmeyers will confirm or will correct me that the enforcement should have been a lot more efficient long time, and I don't know where we are going, whether we'll become a structure or unit, whether we'll become a unit of the Ministry of Finance or Cabinet of Ministers, but this was long time in the making, and like other systemic problems, we will achieve just that.
I'd like to comment from my part that we're not very big fans of changing structures, because sometimes we tend to think that by changing the placement of an institution, the work of an institution will improve. In any case, I think that the Prosecutor General has not hindered the work of the FIU so far. It has not influenced it in any way. So I think that the decisive factor is the people working in the institution. So if we change the way of thinking and the way of management, then I think the FIU and any other institution can become much more effective and stronger, and we don't have to move things around in the terms of structure. Well, thank you very much for the interesting comment. Seeing as Mr. Kalmeyers was mentioned, you have now the right to respond, and I will also add in another question. is it really just a reputation crisis, or is it in fact a system crisis? So, well, I wouldn't say that it's a system crisis, but in any case, we have to resolve the issues that are at hand. As regards the FIU and its placement within the administrative structure, I completely agree with what the minister said, that the FIU has to improve and improve the effectiveness of their work, and also perhaps rethink the main tasks that have been performed. So far, we have received plenty of criticism about the quality of reports prepared by the FIU and the content of these reports. Obviously, we are aware that there are problems and there is a lot of room for improvement, but as regards the independence of the FIU, it has so far been independent and will continue to be so as much as it can be as a state institution, because all state institutions, based on the Constitution as well as the law on state administration structure, are subject to the Cabinet of Ministers, so it cannot be completely outside of the system. And actually, with placing the FIU under the Prosecutor General, which is in turn under the Ministry of Justice, then the FIU cannot be placed under a different element in the whole administration structure, but this is something that we are still working on. As regards what has changed so far, it's the main changes have taken place in the financial sector, where we see a lot of changes with the recent amendments to the law regarding shell companies and various new positions and coordinating positions that have been created. Well, as regards the short-term and medium-term activities, well, as the minister said, the main element is the people working in our institutions. We need competent and skilled employees. This goes for investigators in the police and the financial investigative units and so far and forth. And if we don't have competent staff, then any amendments to laws or any new laws will not be executed properly. So we need skilled staff, as well as we must ensure that our staff is not overburdened and does not burn out in their jobs. Perhaps the colleagues can elaborate on the workload that the investigators have at the moment. But in any case, in Riga, one prosecutor has 3,000 to 4,000 various cases in their workload, so obviously they cannot follow very closely with the work of absolutely all investigators. Yes, thank you very much for that intervention. Now I will ask what the economic police is doing, how is their situation with their workload, and perhaps a more provocative question. I read the state auditor's report, and it says that more than 45% of criminal cases are ended due to the statute of limitations. So my question is whether this trend is carried over also to other sectors. Is this also a problem for the economic police? And if so, is this an issue of a lack in resources, or is there some other reason behind it? Yes, thank you. I'll try to answer briefly to your quite lengthy question. In any case, our workload is not decreasing regardless of what's going on in the FIU. I congratulate Mrs. Notiņa in her new position. Of course, it's clear that we want to see mutual qualitative cooperation between our two institutions, and it's very important that the FIU is the first sort of messenger of that there is an issue, and then the economic and financial police come in. Obviously, we cannot investigate and conclude absolutely all cases that we begin. I don't think any investigative authority anywhere in the world is able to do so. There are various complicated cases that we work on. For example, a person arrives from abroad with falsified identification documents. They begin business operations, and we have established a case and investigation about the illegal laundering of assets, for which the statute of limitations is 15 years. And then during the course of the investigation, our investigators arrive at a conclusion that they are unable to identify the person or that carried out these crimes. Therefore, the case cannot be continued. And in any case, this year we will introduce various simplification measures for investigative procedures, which will allow us to work more quickly and cooperate better with our partners. For example, the so-called easiest cases will be streamlined. As a police officer myself, I don't like to complain about things or resources that we lack, but the Minister of Finance is well aware of what resources we need, and we still have to work with the tasks that we have at hand. We do not bring in people just off the street. We need skilled, experienced, loyal employees. Our selection procedure is very strict, and our remuneration system for police officers working on economic crimes is very motivating, incentivizing. Based on amendments to the remuneration system last year, at least 5 officers under my supervision received very incentivizing bonuses last year for the work that they've done. So I think that this is a very good signal. Well, yes, thank you. However, money is an important motivator, so do you have enough money at the moment? Well, obviously, always there's room for improvement, but compared to the rest of the police force, the police officers working on economic crimes do have slightly better salaries. Well, but we're living in a new age. We have so-called Generation X. And for them, motivating factors are not only salaries, they also have a vision of their own. They need to see how they are contributing to the bigger picture. So how do you plan on providing these elements for these youths to bring them in to work in the economic police? Well, that's a very good question. Police officers are not rich anywhere in the world, so it's always sort of a calling for a person to take this profession. But In any case, we have our remuneration system and social guarantees providing incentives for employees. Also, we have the possibility for rehabilitation courses to be taken throughout the year. So this is something that other public institutions don't have. Thank you. Now a question to Mr. Straume. My question is also about the vision of the institution as well as regarding additional resources. In relation to the very tragic events having taken place recently, the FICIL has worked together with the government bodies on the insolvency legislation reform, and the insolvency administrators are principal or key persons in the procedure and also fall under the supervision of your institution. So my question would be, do you have additional resources in place in the context of the recent reforms to the insolvency legislation? And second of all, there are various opinions. Some say that these legislative amendments are a complete failure. Others say that this is very necessary improvements on the regulations where we need insolvency administrators to be declared officials of the administration. So is this something that we have to keep permanently, or can we in future move towards a free market, so to speak? Yes, thank you. I think that the solution of making insolvency administrators officials is the correct way to go, at least in the current situation. So the current economic and financial situation. As regards the fact that our bureau has to investigate crimes committed by insolvency administrators, that is true. However, here we have a division of responsibilities with Mr. Bauska. So as regards fraud, this is still under the competence of the Ministry of the Economic Police. However, as regards activity of insolvency administrators as officials, for example, in relating to corruption, this falls under the competence of our bureau, and we will definitely investigate any such incidents. Returning to where we began this discussion, the changes having taken place since January 13th, these changes have made us not only discuss the problems at hand, but also work on specific solutions, introduction of specific solutions. And my opinion is that our cooperation and management of the crisis has been quite objective, and I think that the Minister of Finance can agree with me. But in any case, February 13th definitely did make us act quicker. Yes, I just wanted to add on about the sense of mission. I think many police officers, prosecutors, and judges work based on their personal sense of mission. But of course, we have to return to the question of resources, of adequate resources. Because if we supervise the flourishing bank sector, we must find the adequate resources to have a proper control over this sector. Obviously, you cannot feed your children with a sense of mission. We must understand that the police officers and other staff of government authorities and need to be more skilled and experienced than the criminals they investigate. I think that here in our audience we have a lot of business representatives who will agree that this is something that we have to work on. The first line of defense are businesses themselves. You have to create your internal control mechanisms. We have to speak about this. We have to hold this dialogue for you as foreign investors and us as state authorities. We have to admit that the first line of defense is internal control, and if this first line of defense is weak, then obviously we have to turn to other mechanisms, and we have to admit that many crimes can often be averted at the very root. So in future, I would like to move towards a situation where not all claims filed with the police warrant investigation, because the main guiding principle must be a risk-based approach. And in a risk-based approach, we cannot afford to investigate absolutely all crimes. So we have to first think about how we can protect ourselves. For example, if you go to a sketchy neighborhood at night, then obviously you have to be prepared to lose a few euros from your pocket. Similarly, you have to understand where risks lie. You have to try and avoid them if you can. You have to understand where to report any incidents if they have taken place. You have to know where to report if an official has requested a bribe, and you have to know what information to provide to us. Yes, I think it's the right time now to involve Ms. Kuzmina in our discussion. Ms. Nortinya already touched upon the issue, so about decriminalization, because for the State Revenue Service, you are quite closely connected with the business environment. You're actually the closest authority to the business environment. The other authorities are sort of fulfilling a reactive or a response function. So what is your opinion on the short-term and mid-term development goals? Yes, I am from the tax and administration division of the State Revenue Service. And I have to say that obviously we can't expect things to change overnight. And one of the main problems that we have is the combating, investigation, prevention of tax crime. And of course, these are very complex crimes, as colleagues already mentioned. The investigations take a very long time and require experienced staff with the necessary skills. I'd like to separate financial and economic crimes, because this division is not perhaps always clear to everyone. Financial crimes are crimes pertaining to the state budget. So these are crimes pertaining to taxes and tax evasion. For example, these are crimes such as tax evasion, tax fraud, and legalization of criminally obtained assets, or money laundering, basically. So in order for you to understand what it is that we investigate, that there are various processes. There's a passive tax evasion, where people basically just don't pay taxes and hope that they won't be discovered. And then there are persons and legal entities that join in on intentional schemes and mechanisms to evade taxes, registering fictitious deals and so forth in order to finance their further activities. So in investigation of these crimes, we do have various problems and challenges, and we need to work on communication with the public. Our communication with colleagues is very successful also. Well, just a question on how and if at all do you cooperate with the public in your investigation of financial crimes? Well, yes, that is exactly what I wanted to say. Wanted to take this opportunity to address the public. Of course, we don't have enough resources. We don't have enough staff. We have a high staff turnover, and it is difficult for people to jump right into our complex procedures and investigations. So it is sometimes difficult for us to ensure that all cases are brought to the prosecutor for further proceedings. But we are trying to communicate with the public, and we are promoting or urging people to report any suspicious incidents that they have witnessed, and we respond to such reports as much as we can. The public is forthcoming and is involving itself, providing support to us in the form of information. Well, I think Ms. Northing has something to say on this. So I just wanted to add on regarding what the State Revenue Service is already doing at the moment. And so perhaps what the State Revenue Service as a whole is doing in terms of communicating with the public. This communication is not perhaps yet very well stipulated in legislation, but I think it would be interesting for many of you to hear that the legislation now states or provides a new format for communicating, for our institutions communicating with the public. And the government has worked on it for over a year. For this public-private partnership, where the FIU will actually be the coordinating institution. Which this new communication platform will bring together the FIU with other regulating authorities, where we will be able to discuss what sort of specific tasks that we can perform to improve our combating of financial and economic crime. And so the public sector, although it will not be directly involved in this platform itself, it will benefit from the closer communication between the members of the platform, and in turn the regulating authorities will be able to obtain information easier and quicker from the public sector without having to go through this burdensome procedure of communicating information. So I think that this is the new reality, this exchange of information, because without it we cannot combat financial and economic crime.
I would also like to underline that this is a good example of us not living in an isolated world, the government not being separated by others, from others by a wall. We can learn from others, and basically we have, when it comes to the cooperation platform, this is what we have transferred from the UK, and there are a lot of lessons that we have learned since February. First of all, we have to understand that it is a very bad signal to the outside world if we are saying that, we have a specific national legislation and that's why we are bound by it, or we can't do this and that. Financial sector is working on an international level according to international standards, and even if we say that, we can't really prosecute them because we are bound by our legislation, the banks will be complaining, will receive a lot of complaints that banks are not opening accounts and are not working with us, and those are not only Scandinavian banks, evil Scandinavian banks that are not doing that, and banks can use different tools to make those transactions, and those reputation risks and other systemic risks can unfortunately put us on a black list, and we need to therefore be very proactive to regain the trust of international community, and we have to become more transparent and have to meet international standards. What will the outside world think about us if they see that we don't have a single honest insolvency practitioner or lawyer? If we have problems with insolvency practitioners and lawyers, then we have to tackle those problems. And why do we have this very sort of, again, isolated system where there is a narrow or very small number of insolvency practitioners that are then assigned different cases? We should have a fair competition on fair basis so that those insolvency practitioners could help our country, in a transparent and honest way. And we can't, just hide behind our legislation which limits or does not permit us to do something. If we ask everyone else to play by the rules of the game, those rules of the game were created 20 years ago because of not the most honest ideas in mind. When it comes to grey economy, our people are very tolerant towards a grey economy and state police, and I know that there are other law enforcement agencies which are working for the public benefit, for the benefit of the public, and we try to expose our success stories to the people to really show that we are there and we are determined and committed, and to also show the criminals that they shouldn't become self-complacent, because one day we might come knocking on their door. And we are involved in a multitude of awareness-raising initiatives and campaigns together with Dutch colleagues. The Ministry of Finance is implementing a project. After completion of project in autumn, there's going to be an information campaigns on drug mules, how dangerous it is to be a drug mule. And then there's the AFCOS or the Olaf initiative or project on defrauding. So these are the information campaigns that we can join to raise the public awareness, and it's really important to explain to the people what we are doing, and sort of state-private partnership in this sense is very important, and we are always open to such collaboration, but we again have to work in the framework of the law, and this cooperation that we have with the commercial banking or the financial sector cooperation platform is a good example in this regard, and we'll continue in the same manner. A question to law enforcement agencies here. Whistleblowers law is very important to foster collaboration with private sector, but for the whistleblower to really blow a whistle, they need to feel safe and they need to have some kind of assurances that there will be protection provided in case of any risks or threats. What does the anti-corruption agency think about the law? Well, let me formulate it a bit broader. Law enforcement agencies and each and every inhabitant needs a law on whistleblowing if they, potentially consider becoming whistleblowers. But I would like to now underline as well that those regulatory bodies responsible for controls or supervision or surveillance, those regulatory bodies or enforcement bodies need to ensure that their staff will also be protected, that there will not be any persecutions either by the employer or by the entity on which they've blown a whistle, so that they could go out there, explore and investigate, collect intelligence and then blow a whistle. So not only private sector but also the public sector need to provide certain protections. And what is your recommendation or what is your advice? Because we have investors, businesses here. If a business wants to blow a whistle, what would you recommend to them? I have a very specific question. Can a chairman of the board be the best person to talk to about a potential offense or irregularity? Should you blow your whistle to the chairman of the board? Well, this is a very broad question, in fact, and I don't have a short answer to that. I think that, as Madam Znotin mentioned, private sectors need to have internal controls, strong internal controls, in order to prevent possible involvement of a business entity in, God forbid, a criminal activity. And when it comes to anti-corruption agency, we are, of course, looking into the corruption cases, into public procurement cases, and we often get appeals against those decisions, and sometimes businesses form a cartel in order to win or get a contract as a result of a tender, and then they try to launder the money. So we have to cut back on that kind of corruption, whereas private sector needs to basically report on any shady activity and have to refrain from joining a cartel, and we need that information in order to prosecute them. So you support whistleblowers law? Yes, definitely. Mr. Prosecutor General, what do you think about that? Well, we need to make changes in the criminal procedure law and need to adopt a whistleblowers law. The current legislative initiative that has been submitted to the Parliament actually provides that each institution or agency should provide for protection of those who are blowing a whistle. But when it comes to financial and economic crime, criminal procedure law provides a protection in pre-trial investigation, and Prosecutor General can decide on whether a whistleblower needs to be protected, and we offer them a new identity and a witness protection program, and either we use a nickname, for example, in all the investigation materials or documents. We can also provide them personal protection. We can again give them a new identity, change their personal data, and in most extreme cases we can also move them to another country, and we have had cases like that, but those are very severe cases when there is a threat, direct threat to health or life of a witness or her property, and we have to therefore protect them much more actively. But those protections are also available to the whistleblower. So if a whistleblower feels threatened, then the government or the state needs to take care of minimizing those threats. And I can't really assure you that we can protect the we can protect the health of the witnesses, but not always are we able to protect the property of a witness. And if we see that we are unable to mitigate the risk, we also let them go as witnesses. For example, two individuals have agreed on a particular or have conspired to commit a particular financial or economic crime, and they know that only two of them have conspired, and suddenly evidence or intelligence is presented that reveals or enables to detect their conspiracy, and there's only one source who could have possibly leaked that, then of course so clear. For us to make a law a functioning one, we have to increase the trust towards the government or public bodies. Whistleblowers will blow the whistle only if they'll see that there is action, there is a follow-up, that there is proper pre-trial investigation and conviction, and that will help us, deter those criminals from committing a crime, and we can of course protect the witnesses if they are threatened by anybody. But sometimes whistleblowers don't even blow the whistle because they see that quite often, loud big cases are dropped or are not investigated to the end or not prosecuted completely. Well, I was actually myself personally involved in drafting the whistleblowers law together with Mr. Lepinch. We have had a lot of committee meetings in the parliament, and I should tell you that it's going to be a poor framework. The law will be adopted, but it is going to be a poor one because politicians have been very hesitant and they've been dragging this for as long as possible because there is lack of political will, and those MPs or politicians don't want the whistleblowers law to function properly. It would be a nice law, especially given the upcoming elections. So I would like to urge the politicians to think about this, because this would be a very important step towards regaining confidence or trust, and I very much support the whistleblowers law. But I was listening to Mr. Kalmers and the protections that they offer. I wouldn't blow a whistle if I would have to change my identity afterwards in order to be protected and be safe. So what I'm saying basically is that, whistleblowers are, it's a story about not knowing your client or employer, and you start working for somebody and then you suddenly see that he's been corrupted through and through. So businesses, when looking for partners, should very carefully analyze their partners, whether it's your employer or a suspicious business partner. With due diligence and internal controls, you can avoid becoming a whistleblower and also boost the compliance with the ethical standards as well. So, Madam Kuzmin, what do you think about this? For example, if somebody comes to you and tells you, this is what I've been seeing, in my company, and how do you respond? How do you react to whistleblowers and their reports? Yes, we have had such reports. People have been reporting a potential crime to us, and they have also identified concerns about possible harm that might be done to them somewhere when they're walking down the street because they have blown a whistle on somebody. However, I can't really, or I fail to recollect a case when we have had to reveal our sources. We can take their information anonymously without identifying the whistleblower, and we can use them as a source, as an anonymous source, and focus on the information that they can provide to us. So we basically act upon the intelligence that they have provided to us, and then we investigate. And how do you cooperate with the economic crimes unit? Do you exchange intelligence or information? Do you have any success stories? Well, we have very good cooperation with the economic crimes unit, and we also with other services to investigate or to check the evidence or intelligence. We have to cooperate with other services because we are trying to defend the national interest and recover the monies that have been stolen from the government. And when it comes to financial crimes, we follow the criminal procedure law, and we work with economic crimes unit and other professional police units, other police units to conduct the investigation, and we receive a lot of support from our colleagues in other police units. And however, going back to whistleblowing, if people are concerned about their safety, then again, would like to reiterate that we can use those people or work with those people as anonymous source without revealing their identity. And I could also share my experience regarding the best practices. Maybe people are not going to go directly to the panelists, but internal controls should be strengthened in your businesses. There should be an independent officer. It does not necessarily have to be a chairman of the board. It can be a compliance officer, external audit, internal audit, any in-house officer who is made responsible for ensuring that your company is working in a transparent manner and is sort of going through a self-cleansing if there are corruption problems or any crimes or any offences being committed by any of the staff members. And that would also contribute to more efficient prevention, because quite often those are not crimes, those are criminal activities that are not crimes in a legal sense. Now, we've talked about working with society and raising the public awareness, but what about strategic partners and allies of Latvia? It's not easy to work with them as well. On one hand, Latvia is an independent democratic republic or country. And on the other hand, as Minister for Finance mentioned, we are a part of the international financial system. So I would like to ask the panelists and Minister for Finance in particular. We know, we were told in the morning that you can take part in our morning session or discussion because you had a very important meeting with Mr. Billingsley from the U.S. Department of Treasury. So where are the global trends that have been identified by international partners? What did they tell you?
Well, first of all, no one from outside can tell us what to do. We have to do it ourselves, and we have to understand that we have to take the reins in our own hands and lead the horse in front of our carriage, so to speak. Second of all, we have various international partners that share the same goals as the Republic of Latvia, that being that Latvia becomes a secure and prosperous democratic country free of illegal funds. And one of the tasks to achieve this goal is the reform of the financial system. And next, of course, we have our partners that we have to take into consideration, and we saw this after the 311 report, that this bank was isolated by the international financial market. We have a question here saying that in February we had the ABLV. Will there be a next bank to fail? I hope that there will not be such a failure in our future. We have the Financial Capital Markets Commission, which is supervising the sector, and the also international as well as local public is following closely on these events. And I'd also like to say that we have to take advantage of international cooperation. We can learn from the ABLV experience as well as others, is that this issue of combating money laundering has been raised to the level of the EU. And now one of the 6 priorities of the banking union, which is a brand new priority, so 6D, is to combat coordinated money laundering. And I think that it's very good that we're not alone in this game. We can use the help and assistance of our international partners to help us find solutions and resolve the situation. Well, another question. We hear that non-resident deposits need to be cut down to 5%. So why is it not 1% or 10%? Where does this 5% come from? And another question, is a Swedish deposit considered a non-resident deposit? So where do these 5% come from? Well, as the FCTC has explained, we are here speaking about high-risk non-residents where the EU is separated from non-EU countries, and these 5% is the indicative level. If we are speaking about high-risk non-residents, so for which banks and other regulatory authorities are ready to deal with. So this is the level of risk that we can handle regarding the deposits from people from outside of the EU. Well, perhaps a question for Mrs. Nuotiņa. How do you view the situation? How can we achieve the right balance of, on the one hand, we have to combat money laundering. On the other hand, we have cases where quite real investors are not able to open bank accounts, cannot receive or pay dividends. So is this just overreach, or what is your comment about these situations that we now see? Well, I have to say that I am currently no longer even on 2 chairs, but while these proposals were being prepared, our work group already indicated that the policy must be strategic and foreseeable, and the policy that has been implemented now is sort of an emergency procedure. It wasn't initially planned when we were discussing the legislative amendments regarding combating money laundering. I have to say that it is indeed a pity that we find ourselves in a situation with such rash changes which harm both fraudulent as well as honest businesses. And Of course, we have these very strict mechanisms in place and strict restrictions, and many authorities are sort of scared to not to do enough, and in the whole process we have perhaps sort of failed on publicly communicating why these things are being done. But we do indeed need a balanced policy. Of course, it is possible that in this whole procedure we will lose one or more honest and hardworking businesses. But obviously this means that we have to work together and discuss future strategy. Perhaps in future this percentage will also change because we will have better capacity to combat these types of crimes and attempts to evade transparency. So why are we here today? Obviously, why do we constantly see the same faces in the audience? It's because we are discouraging dishonest businesses from operating, and we are taking significant steps forward. However, we have various authorities here represented here today, but we also need to involve the courts in these discussions, because the courts play a crucial role in the process of removing from the market and penalizing the dishonest business owners. In future, we will have to think about an updated strategy, updated policy to avoid another January 13th. There's another question, which I think is very interesting, is that the top 4 banks are refusing to service payments outside of the European Economic Area. What would be the solution? Are there any solutions? Well, we have representatives here in the audience. Well, is this a consequence of February 13th, or is this a systemic change? Well, I think it's a combination of February 13th, which is sort of on us, and second of all, the economic situation is always challenging for everyone, including the banks. We have various sanctions internationally in place against Korea and Iran, and relations are quite volatile between the EU and the US and various other international partners regarding how business should be performed. So even if these sanctions do not directly affect businesses in the EU, then the secondary sanctions do actually affect the bank sector and its appetite for risk. So I think that this is one of the reasons why we also need a more active dialogue with the management of the Nordic banks, because the banks themselves or alone, they cannot resolve the existing challenges of in these geopolitical situation, how to proceed and do the business that they have selected for themselves. Well, yes, and we have a very specific question. Is it the responsibility of the FCTC, or is this the responsibility of the legislature to change the existing regulations? Well, a lot has been done over the past couple of years in our accession process to the OECD. A lot of legislative reforms were introduced, and I think the Financial Capital Market Commission has enough resources at their disposal to carry out this work, but in any case, I think it's an issue of execution of regulations, and I can't point any fingers because we are here, all of us, today to talk about these issues as something that has to be resolved throughout the whole system together, and with all of the state authorities and the courts working together. So, well, we see that the FIU can work only based on the legislation. So do you perhaps see a need for reforms or amendments to the relevant legislation? Well, I have already said that we need a completely new law in this area, a law that would allow for businesses to easily report information and understand what they have to do, and a new law that would also simplify the procedure based on whether we're speaking about a large bank with a lot of risk factors because it has a lot of customers, or a small entity that's been placed on the risky list because it has just a single risky element. So also we have to define the responsibilities, or precisely define the responsibilities of all the authorities. But of course, a single legislative amendment is not the solution to everything. Many of those present here today know very well that we have always had this idea, which has had actually many opponents from people who thought that the insolvency administrators do not have any problems. So we've been accused of placing too much focus on actual introducing amendments rather than executing them in practice. Yes, well, several years ago we had a reform on the criminal proceedings or procedure law, but despite these legislative reforms, is it really the law that has the problem, or is it a problem with execution and resources? Well, I think it's both. The existing criminal procedure law took effect in 2005, so it's been 13 years since we've had this law. Yes, it was created in order to simplify the criminal procedure, but in the process of adopting this law, it was tweaked several times, and as a result, just the bare bones of the initial proposal have remained, and the law as it stands has sort of become just a formal guideline of how to format the procedure and how to document it. And the result is that now the prosecutor has sort of become a registrar of documents, and God forbid they file a document incorrectly, then the whole procedure falls through. So the plan is to change the system as a whole, not just through legislative amendments, but through actual practice of 76 to 88% of direct managers admit that the education programs at the police college do not properly prepare people for working in the state authorities. So this is one opinion, but what is your response to this fact? Well, I can just mention that we finally no longer have an argument that the liquidation of the State Police College was a mistake. Obviously, it did need restructuring, but at the time of the crisis, we had very little resources. And now, today, the resources allocated to the police college are the same as they once were allocated to the police academy. We do have a course at the police college for prosecutors, but unfortunately it is quite a poor educational program. We have a lot of students leaving the course. We can expect no more than 40 people graduating from the existing educational program, and in the Daugavpils University is currently looking at opportunities of introducing courses or educational programs that could produce staff for the prosecutor general and police force. However, we are currently struggling with this educational issue. That is true. Now, Ms. Kuzmina, what is your opinion on the police academy issue? Ms. Notiņa? Yes, Ms. Kuzmin says that she would support that it has to be restored. Now, I agree that it was a significant mistake to abolish the police academy. We have agreed already that we do need a specialized university, but I do not want to step on any toes at the existing universities, but I want to say that the lectures and study materials provided by the existing universities is probably outdated. If we want to have qualified and skilled financial and economic crime investigators who bring advantages and benefits to the state authorities, then we have to think very carefully about what we want to teach these people. If we are teaching them from outdated books and outdated materials, then this is unfortunately the reason why 50 people enroll in the education program initially, and then half of them leave the program halfway through. So the Generation X, which you mentioned, Mad, is not interested in the existing programs. They're not interested in coming to work for us using the resources that we have. We have to increase our prestige, our authority, and the public recognition of this profession. We just recently saw a wonderful example with the firefighters saving a falling person, and the police force and prosecutors are also on a daily basis carrying out hard work, but people don't see this in daily life. So I agree that we need better resources, better premises. The prosecutor's office has many vacancies simply because we lack the premises for our employees. Our buildings are on the verge of falling apart. We have been asking for additional resources and new premises for years already. So now we are hoping for a new building in 2021. So it will have taken 15 years for us to obtain a new building. So what kind of prestige can we talk about here? We visit regional offices that some have proper premises, others don't. But so here we're speaking not only about salaries and premises, we also have to talk about workload. What kind of efficiency can we expect from a prosecutor who is simultaneously working on 8 or 9 large economic crime cases, which each of them involving tens of suspects, and all of this requires so much work and lengthy hours, and obviously people have their own personal life, and as much as they may love their job, often enough we see that this love for the job is killed off in the first year in office. I just want to finish briefly. An official from the Riga regional unit recently told me that when they receive new employees from the police college, they're ready to work, and then they are presented with 180 cases that they have to work, and they hand in their letter of resignation a week later because they just can't handle the workload. Well, I think we have to stop crying over the police academy, which was liquidated. In any case, most people going into work for the police force had received an education in other universities. At the moment, we have the police college, where we have an education program of 2 years, and the people graduating from the police college can continue their education at the Riga Stadiņš University. We are providing information on these educational possibilities to anyone interested. We have to reinforce the existing structure in the police force and the education for the police force, and looking to the future, we can perhaps think about a specialized university or academy, which could perhaps be created under one of the existing universities. Well, I just wanted to add from a sideline point of view. The manager who placed 150 cases on the desk of a new employee have to think about what they're doing as well. They have to understand that they are setting an example and creating the atmosphere in the workplace. And another thing that the Parliament has spoken at length about, but little has been done on the issue, is the decriminalization of minor offenses. Our colleagues from the customs and the financial police have emphasized that it would be a great help in their reducing their workload, as they would be better able to focus on large crimes and significant crimes. Well, we've had a very interesting discussion, but I'd like to ask you a perhaps extraordinary task. I'd like every member of our panel to come up with a specific action point, as we know that all good discussions end with such action points. So the members of the panel could provide their ideas on what has to be done by entrepreneurs, state authorities, to improve the existing situation. Well, I think first of all we have to focus on the security of data in our own businesses, on internal security to avoid hacking or phishing in your system, thus committing fraudulent activity through your business or through your systems, because if such fraudulent activity is carried out, then it's already too late. It has to be prevented at the very root. And we all know that if you have any information at your disposal that there are plans or there are attempts of committing fraudulent activity through your systems, for example, then you definitely have to report this to the competent authorities. Yes, so your conclusion is that businesses have to follow closely their IT systems and report any suspicious incidents. Well, my invitation to you would be to email me at the Ministry of Finance if you have any specific comments on the negative and positive aspects of what the government has been doing so far. Well, it looks like all the brochures have been taken that I brought in here today. At the Corruption Prevention Bureau, in cooperation with the Competition Council, has created some guidelines for the business sector and business owners on how to act in order to create an honest business environment. So please read these brochures. It also holds contact information where to report any suspicious incidents such as bribery or corruption or competition offenses. Yes, thank you. If we had some suspicions that someone may have stolen the brochures, but in any case, all of this information is also available on the website of the Corruption Prevention Bureau. There are various methods of contacting us, and we will readily provide this information to you. Mrs. Notiņa, I think you have to start today already. Open the law on my institution and check to see if you aren't our clients by any chance. If you are, then please do come in next Friday at 4 and the meeting that we have planned, and we will look at how we can improve our cooperation. Mr. Kalmeirs, I think I have to agree with Ms. Notiņa. We have to begin with ourselves. We have to look at whether we are indeed as clean and perfect as we present ourselves to the public at large. So just take a moment to look at yourself in the mirror, so to speak, and if you are not as perfect as you think, then as you try to present yourself, then try and evaluate whether you can change what you have been doing. I don't want to point any fingers or mention any specific examples, but I had a recent conversation with someone, and I asked them, so was it really worth it? Was it worth doing what you did? Well, I would suggest taking this self-assessment early in the morning, as this is the most productive time of day. So, yes, I would agree with my colleagues, and I have to say that the State Revenue Service is open for cooperation and communication. If you have any suspicions or incidents to report, please come to us. It will be completely anonymous. Also, when choosing cooperation partners, choose them wisely, choose trustworthy partners. You can check their credibility at the State Revenue Service. Well, thank you to our panel. So, thank you very much.